In John 6:44, Jesus says, "No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him." But what does that mean? Who does the Father draw, and how does he do it? Well, sometimes we try to make the answer to this question really complicated. It's actually rather simple. In fact, Jesus gave us the answer in the next verse when he quotes the Old Testament prophets. He says, "It is written in the prophets, and they shall all be taught by God. Therefore, everyone who has heard and learned from the Father comes to me." God draws people by teaching them about himself. And if we really pay attention, we'll find ourselves fixated on him. When we really understand who he is, why would we not come to him? So today, let's consider 4 ways that God draws people to himself. First, he draws through his creation. This is what we call general revelation. Maybe you've gazed at a beautiful sunset and thought, wow. Or maybe you looked at satellite pictures that show the immensity of the universe, or tried to understand how things work at the quantum level, so small that it's invisible even to our high-tech equipment. All of this should draw us to the God who created it. All we have to do is look around us and we can see that there is a higher power that designed everything. It's like God is saying, hey, look at me. So when we reject him and do what we know is wrong, we are without excuse, as Romans 1:20 tells us. The second way that God draws us to himself is through his word. This is what we call special revelation. Remember when you used to write love notes to try to get the attention of that cute little girl or boy back in the 3rd grade? You probably described all the wonderful things about yourself, how irresistible you are. That's what God did for us. He gave us a written message about himself that we call the Bible. But it's more than just a love note. It's a message that explains the terrible situation we're in and what he did to rescue us from it. The third way that God draws us to himself is through his messengers. In the Old Testament, he sent prophets to reveal his power, his love, his justice, and his mercy. He's also sent many others since then, the apostles, pastors, missionaries, all of us who have ever shared his message with anyone else. Finally, God draws us through his Son, who is Jesus. Hebrews 1 tells us that God, who at various times and in various ways spoke in times past to the fathers by the prophets, has in these last days spoken to us by his Son. Of course, we can't sit down and have coffee with Jesus today, but we can read about him. We can read about the miracles he did. We can read about how he lived his life without sin. Most importantly, we can read about his resurrection that proved who he was. He said in John 12:32, "And I, if I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all peoples to myself." When he says lifted up, he was referring to being lifted up on the cross. His death was the ultimate sacrifice of love, which should draw us to himself. So God draws us to himself through his creation, his word, his messengers, and his Son. But if his drawing is so compelling, why doesn't everyone come to him? Jesus actually answered that question himself. As we read in John 6:45, "Therefore, everyone who has heard and learned from the Father comes to me." It's not enough just to hear, we have to hear and learn. He's given us enough information to hear. It's up to us to be willing to learn. When we consider his creation, his word, his messengers, and his Son, we have to make a choice. We can accept him or reject him. He's done his part, now it's up to us to do ours.